It feels good to be back home. I tell you something, man, that trip took a lot out of me. Both me and Mia were just exhausted. And, man, but it's good to be back, and it's good to be back here, able to work on videos. Here's a little bit behind the scenes of what's going on. I have products that I have to demo, right? And these companies want these things done quickly, but oftentimes, sometimes you open something up and realize you need this adapter, or you need that adapter, or you need to charge this, or you need to charge that. So I'm trying to get caught up with all that stuff because, they don't realize your daily schedule. They don't realize that you're not able to film all day. And so I'm trying to get those things done this week. I've also got 2 incredible interviews scheduled for this Friday. Family's supposed to go out of town, so hopefully everything works out with that, and then I can announce, or maybe here's the deal, maybe I'll just have them pop up in the Rockstar members section. People go, wow, really cool interview. So that's what's going on right now, And one of the interviews, it got me to thinking about, my little bit of time that I did in the studio. I was not a Nashville studio player, mostly, played live, but every now and then you would get the opportunity to go into the studio, right? Either with a project that you're working on or a band that you're playing in. Demo sessions would be something that, I would do from time to time. And, the other thing is, getting to, as you see right there, I've got a gold record on my wall, and from time to time I rotate things out on the wall and all that. But I was very fortunate to join a touring act that liked to use their band in the studio. So I was very lucky to do that. And it just so turns out that one of the people that I'm getting ready to interview on the channel was one of the most recorded guitar players in history, right? Incredible studio career. And I just perused the list of people albums that he had played on, and it is literally a who's who of one success after another. Huge things. Albums that I had bought in the past, or songs that I had listened to on the radio and had no idea that this guy was playing on it, right? And, and here's the deal. I did the records, with Colt Ford, on my time, touring with Colt Ford and all that. And it was a whirlwind. It was 135 dates a year. It was, radio, doing radio stuff in the mornings, and, we did some TV appearances, in some smaller markets and then up in Canada. And it was just so much stuff that half of it I can't even remember now. Right. And here's the thing, man, being in the studio can be a high pressure thing, right? And for me, being a live player, and the different types of live gigs that I did, it got comfortable, man. I got comfortable playing in the bands that I was in. I'd get comfortable playing on the type of gigs that I did in Nashville. And getting into a studio situation, that's a high pressure situation. And here's the other thing. You got to have the tools for the job. If you're going to be a studio guitarist, you can't own, 2 or 3 guitars and 1 amp. And look, and I've got a lot of guitars, yes, but do I have enough guitars right now to be a session guitar player ready to play anything? No. Don't have a 12 string. Don't have a baritone. Don't have, and a couple of different options, on that side. Do I have a lap steel? No. Do I have a bouzouki? No. And so, do I have a Jazzmaster? No. Do I have a Jaguar? No. These are the kind of things, man, people might, and here's the deal. If you're a session player and you're getting called for a session, a lot of these guys will have a trunk of guitars, and they may have to swap out things. If the producer calls them and says, hey, I'm looking for this particular thing, you might think, okay, I need to pull out my Jazzmaster, or I need this funky, weird Japanese guitar, old Japanese funky guitar. I need to pull that out and bring that out. And you have to have all those instruments maintained. You're going to need a rack with, 3 or 4 different amp heads and a good, 412 cab and all this, man. We're talking about thousands and thousands of dollars worth of gear. Now, the closest I ever did to having all that was being on the road, because I built a huge rig with 3 amp heads and a 412 cab and all that. But that lived in the trailer that was pulled by the tour bus, right? So when we would go on the road to do these albums, I would have to pull one of those heads out or use a head that I had at home and bring that down to the studio. And oftentimes, look, when I started out on the road, I got the call here's the thing, man, you get the call to go do something. And I had been out doing oldies gigs where everything was fly dates and you plug into backline. So, and on the backline, we would have 2 twin reverbs. And I was playing this clean, pristine 60s style, pop rock type stuff. So it was completely the opposite of all of a sudden, doing this road gig. And, so I had to get on the gig, start making money, and then start putting money back into the gear that I was using. Right. And man, I started off with bare minimum. At first I showed up with my vintage Super Reverb, which just recently sold on Carter Vintage. But I had a Super Reverb in a road case, right? And then that was a vintage amp, so that didn't really work for the gig, right? And that gig wasn't a vintage amps gig. That amp would have been perfect for a different gig, but I ended up bringing that amp home and then using a Bogner Alchemist because I had that at home, and I tried that for a while, but I knew that wasn't of the caliber to do that. So then eventually I brought out one of my 412 cabs, and I bought a Egnator tweaker, because look, man, I was coming from doing road gigs, an oldies act that wasn't making that much money, and so I didn't have a ton of money to put into a rig. I was out there, to make money, obviously. But, when you figure you're making $300 a show, that's not enough to go rush out and buy thousands of dollars worth of gear. So I had to gradually stockpile and build up this rig that I needed to get on the road. And, in the back of my mind, I thought, well, maybe if I get off the road, maybe I could get into doing sessions, or maybe I can take the next step up. But, here's the thing, man. Being in the studio is a lot of pressure, right? And, I don't think, man, my experience, and look, here's another experience that I had, is getting to go with Joe Wooten and John Billings and, Dorico Watson and all, this whole, Shane Terrio, who's got a great YouTube channel, great guitar player, going down to record an album in Monterrey, Mexico, with a producer who had worked at A&M in LA back in the day. He had worked on the Stars session, right? And going down there, and look, they provided all the amps, right? They had acoustic guitars down there. We just had to go down there with 2 guitars each for the guitar players and a pedal board. But man, I remember when we did that session, man, I didn't have a pedal board that was like a Session Ace pedal board with everything on it. I had to cobble together a pedal board and, had a couple drive pedals and maybe a flanger, a phaser, a wah-wah, and a delay pedal. And that was it. And it was nothing impressive, right? But I knew they were going to have a bunch of amps down there and we could pick and choose the amps. You just have to make it work with what you got, right? And so they had sent the material ahead of time. Here's the songs you're going to play. Everybody learn the songs, chart the songs out, yada, yada, yada. But, it's different. Like in Nashville, you may knock out 3 or 4 songs, in a 4-hour period, right? You're knocking out songs like that. Boom, 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 boom. And if there's going to be overdubs or solos or whatever, those might be done on another day. You might get to go in there by yourself and one day and track solos, or maybe they're going to bring in a ringer to do the solos or, something like that. But this session down in Monterrey, Mexico, man, it was what I would call an old school LA session. This guy was an old school LA producer, engineer, right? Who had been hired by this, it was like owned by a Mexican airlines, built this $1 million studio in Monterrey, Mexico. I mean, dude, this was top of the line, everything, right? But man, we get down there and dude, it's like when I say old school, we were there for a week tracking, but we would spend literally like all day sometimes on one song. And when I say all day, we would track for 6 hours doing take after take of the same song. So much so that it felt like we were pulling the life out of the song, right? We were very much all a bunch of live players on that session. And, you could just see the life come out of the room when we do a take and it felt good and everybody was happy. And the guy goes, I want to do another one. And he just go, okay, so and here's the thing, man, for a lot of that session, we tracked all the basic tracks. And then somehow, I don't know if they liked the way I played acoustic or what was going on, but I ended up getting called to track acoustic on those sessions. And I'm in there, and dude, I am in there so long playing acoustic, and he wanted all of the acoustic tracks doubled. So he would get what he wanted out of me performance-wise, an hour, 2 hours, maybe 3 hours in there, and then go, okay, now double it. And man, I was in there so long that it was getting to the point where my ADD brain, I couldn't even focus on what he was hearing that he liked and what he wanted. And it wouldn't have mattered even if I had nailed it the first take, which, I was able to play through these songs. I had already charted the songs. I'd already learned the songs. But he wanted every single, it was like what I would imagine a Mutt Lange session would be. But my brain just got completely beat up, man. I was literally I was trying to get the other guitar player, hey, why don't you track acoustic on this next one? And somehow, I think I ended up doing the majority of the acoustic and, a bunch of electric stuff. But man, doing a marathon session like that where I can imagine working with Mutt Lange. I don't know if I'd have the patience to do it. And I know a lot of some of the Nashville guys that played on that. I remember, hearing an interview with Brent Mason talking about how, he'd do a pass and go, okay, thinking, because Nashville, you do a good pass, that's good. Next, everything is done very quickly, but all of a sudden to change gears and work with somebody who's want to do pass after pass after pass, hours and hours playing the same part over and over again. Man, I was literally ready to crawl out of my skin, right? And so, here's the deal, man. After all of that, after my experience and my experience being on the road, and then here's the thing, coming off the road where you're cooked, man, you're cooked. And normally you'd come home and you'd have Monday, you'd get home Sunday, you'd have Monday, Tuesday, maybe Wednesday off, or maybe Wednesday evening you'd get back on the bus and go back out, right? Or be gone for weeks at a time, right? Be gone for 3 weeks because you're on a West Coast run, and then come back on a Monday and go into to record. And here's the deal. We'd come home on a Sunday morning when normally you would come home and just eat something and go right to bed because you're just completely fried from the road. You would get home and you'd have an email with all of the songs that you're going to track on Monday morning. And you've got two choices. You could either not even listen to it and just rest, but that's not how I operate. So I would come home and be exhausted and just begin charting out tunes and trying to think about, what am I going to play on this? Because the demos would be largely just guitar and vocal. So you've got to totally go, okay, write the chart out. But while you're writing it out, your brain is going, okay, what am I going to play on this? What guitars do I need to bring tomorrow morning? All of that, I would often ask that, because here's the deal. Then you've got to haul your gear down there. Most session players have cartage, where they have a cartage company that brings their gear down there, maybe sets it up or places it where it needs to be. But I would have to load whatever vehicle I had at the time, put my 412 cab into my Honda Civic, right? Stuff as many guitars, 4 or 5 guitars into the car somehow, maybe 3 or 4 in the passenger seat. Get my pedal board in the floorboard of the back seat of the Civic. Maybe stuff the trunk of the car with a bunch of stuff, and go down there on a Monday morning. And look, man, you're fried, you're cooked, right? You're cooked from the road, right? And here's the deal. You play on stuff, right? And, there was one time a big name producer was getting called in to produce a couple cuts. And it was thought that, he might use the band, but then again, he was also an amazing guitar player. And look, man, yes, the thought of getting to work with this amazing producer was an amazing thought. Oh, wow, that's a great opportunity. That's so cool, right? But here's the thing. Knowing that I'm going to be cooked from the road and not knowing what kind of session this is going to be, frankly, it was a relief when I didn't get the call and the producer ended up playing the guitar parts himself. It was a relief. I was not disappointed at all, because, man, being a road player, being out there, beating it up every night, man, it's tough. It's super tough. You're super tired. You trying to be, the road guy and then playing on the albums is a very tough thing, because they always try to squeeze those sessions in on the few days you have off. And they don't go, oh, let's block out this weekend and we'll get you in the studio. And, it's done the Nashville way, man. Everything's got to be super quick. You don't want to screw up the session. Man, that could jeopardize your position on the road. And so all of that pressure is there when normally you'd want to be resting, right? So that you can go back out and do your job, in a couple of days. So, but here is the funny thing, is realizing one of these guys that I'm going to be interviewing on my channel, I'm sure I'm going to talk about it at a later date, I played on this track on the album. It's a song called Angels and Demons by Cole Ford, right? And it's an album track. It didn't end up, becoming a single or anything like that. But a lot of times, man, some of these this was not a typical country session because it had a hip hop beat, right? It had, gospel vocals. It was crossover all over the place, right? And it had a Christianity theme, right? But I get in there on that session, right? And I hear this hip hop beat, and my mind instantly goes to my comfort zone, which was all the years playing R&B gigs and funk gigs in Nashville. And I just lock right into my, funky chicken picking sort of single note style guitar playing. And I just ride it through the whole track, right? I rode through the whole track playing that style. It was the same 4 or 5 chords played through the whole song, and I was able to find a part that worked over the entire tune. And it was locked in. Now I listen to it and go, yeah, I'm locked in. I'm locked in with the drums. It's tight. That was my comfort zone. It's like, why, there's some cool chord changes going in there, and there's acoustic guitar and all that, but there I am with my blue Strat people have seen on this channel, and just locked into this funky groove. But thinking back and remembering, oh, wait a minute, that huge producer that it didn't get to go in and record with, and frankly was perfectly okay with that huge producer ended up playing the guitar solo on that song. So here's a guy I'm getting ready to interview on my channel, right? And it'll be a blind item for now, right? It'll be a blind item for now. But this huge producer that's an amazing guitar player, there I am on the track playing rhythm guitar. And there is one of the most recorded guitar players in history playing alongside my track. That is an amazing thing, and a revelation that I had when all of a sudden I came upon the opportunity to interview an absolute legend. So stay tuned on this channel to find out who that is. And it's going to be an incredible interview coming up on the channel. Stay tuned.